Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichman along with Shirley Min. Michelle Polston is off this week. Delaware now becomes a focal point in that devastating Amtrak crash. A look this week on how engineers are trained to navigate the nation's rail system.
The state of our infrastructure is on the mind of Delaware's Transportation Secretary. We'll talk about our roads with Jennifer Cohan.
The rural equivalent of Habitat for Humanity is happening downstate. First is in Georgetown to witness a share build.
First, your public media news magazine starts now.
The focus of the Amtrak crash in Philadelphia moves to Delaware. Behind this gate is the Amtrak repair yard in Bear. This industrial park flew its flags at half-staff in the days after the crash. Amtrak's Operations Center is Wilmington. It's where engineer Brandon Bastian learned to operate a train. Avi Wolfman-Arendt visited that facility just days before the accident. Avi.
Thanks, Mark. We had gone to the training facility as part of our Teach Me series. Now, it's our first look this week as we report on how Amtrak teaches their operators what it's like to manage a train run.
All right, because we stop and we check that
11 weeks. That's how long it takes to become an Amtrak engineer. And Stephen Reeves, he's the guy responsible for making that transition happen.
The job for me entails basically managing our locomotive engineer training program.
Some of the recruits he inherits are former freight engineers, but some are what Amtrak calls off the street.
Which means they could be hired from any work environment, from Walmart, to the military.
5 days a week, 8 hours a day, Amtrak bombards these newcomers with information. They learn how to walk on a railroad track, they learn about the mechanics of modern train equipment, they learn safety and operating procedures, and they take tests. Lots of tests.
Throughout their program, they actually have 5 exams that they have to pass with a 90%. If you do not make a 90% on those exams, then you are terminated from the program, and there is not an opportunity to come back.
And there isn't anywhere else to go. This is the only Amtrak training facility for new engineers, and since Amtrak is the only national passenger rail network, if you want to operate an intercity passenger train, you have to pass this class. Then it's on to the real world.
OJT is on-the-job training, so once a student engineer leaves the classroom portion, they go out to the field location where they're going to be actually working at. So during that time, they're actually operating the locomotive underneath the guidance of a OJT coordinator.
Before that, though, they practice on the facility's 3 simulators, which are near replicas of existing train models. Each has a sophisticated dashboard, literal bells and whistles, and video monitors that run simulations based on the actual specifications of the Northeast Corridor.
It is the exact track profile and layout that you would see out in the real world. We're going to release the automatic brake.
Reeves shows me around the controls of a model Acela, Amtrak's highest speed train. Every 30 seconds or so, a small alarm goes off. I have to flick a joystick to silence it, and if I don't, the train assumes I'm incapacitated and brakes automatically.
This is almost like to make sure you haven't passed out.
Passed out or passed away.
Besides this override feature, though, the rest is pretty much manual. The engineer controls the throttle, the engineer controls the brake. It's a lot of responsibility.
There's nobody sitting there watching you, telling you what to do, so you have a lot of freedom to operate the train and just kind of be your own person up there. But then that kind of goes back to, the integrity and maturity. We want to make sure we have the right person up there making those decisions.
Reeves, it should be said, does not do the actual hiring. He also wasn't in charge of training 5 years ago, when, according to media reports, the engineer operating Amtrak Train 188 started on the job. But there is a fundamental tension here for Amtrak. Training costs time and money. It's good for Amtrak's bottom line if students complete and pass the course, but if the course isn't rigorous enough, the wrong people can end up at the helm. That puts a lot of pressure on the hiring process, and Amtrak is looking for people with maturity, good work ethic, and the ability to process lots of information quickly.
If you think about operating at those speeds, imagine yourself driving down the interstate and thinking 3 and 4 miles ahead what's going on. And as an engineer operating those speeds, you're not thinking about what's here in front of me. You're thinking about what's coming up 3 or 4 miles ahead, because stopping a train is not as simple as just pushing the brake.
I asked Reeves to describe for me what it's like to drive a train route, and he said, imagine you're a driver on a highway and you have to know the location of every milepost and every exit for 200 miles. It takes that kind of knowledge and attention to detail.
It really is a lot of information to hold on to. So how many people who go through this engineer course graduate or pass and become engineers?
Reeves told me that it used to be about a few years ago around 70%, but now it's up to around 95%.
Which is a pretty big jump.
Right.
What's behind that?
So the folks at Amtrak say it's more selective hiring, but certainly, you don't want everyone who takes this class to pass it. You want to weed out people who don't belong in the engineer's seat.
All right, very interesting. Thank you very much, Avi. The Amtrak crash has triggered a major debate over the nation's infrastructure. The new head of the Delaware Department of Transportation, Jennifer Cohan, sat down with Shirley Min earlier this week to address that.
Jennifer Cohan is Delaware's Transportation Secretary. Secretary, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We want to talk about infrastructure as topic number one. I think a lot of people agree infrastructure is a big priority, but money always seems to be getting in the way of that. We couldn't get a gas tax passed. State Democrats want to raise the DMV fees, but Republicans want to move the DelDOT operations out of the Transportation Trust Fund into the general fund as a way to make up for the shortfall. What's your take on, first, moving that money out of the Transportation Trust Fund?
Well, actually, we've been having conversations about that for years, and I think the process going forward is going to be a balanced solution. It's going to have to be something along those lines. It makes a ton of sense because the Transportation Trust Fund was originally conceived to do just capital projects. So I know both myself and the governor is also okay with having that conversation. The problem that we're running into currently is that the general fund revenue situation is just as bad, if not worse, than the Transportation Trust Fund revenue situation. So I think having those conversations are important. I think the package that was put forth in House Bill 140 makes a lot of sense, because if you actually look at the makeup of those DMV fees, a lot of those fees are things that you actually either can finance, for example, the document fee. When you buy a new vehicle or even a used vehicle, you can actually finance that. And we are actually the lowest cost state in all of our surrounding states. Even if we move forward with the increase at 4.25 or still, Maryland is at 5%, Pennsylvania is at 6%, so still remaining competitive.
We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the shutdown of I-495. Are we 100% there on that bridge over the Christina River?
We absolutely are. I'm happy to say we are 100% there. And out of that mini crisis came a phenomenal kind of uplift to see what we can actually do and how fast we can get things done, and just the level of effort that went into making that right was just a great thing to see, and we've actually been winning awards in crisis management on dealing with that.
Does DelDOT have any more information on that dirt pile, the 50,000-ton dirt pile that kind of triggered the whole thing? Where does that whole investigation stand?
Well, we are actually working on litigation. There is several different parties that are involved in that, but we are pursuing that, and we're looking to recoup some of those dollars.
And where are we on that? Is it still just beginning in recouping?
We're just in the beginning stages of working on liability.
Where do our bridges stand in the state? Do we need to be worried at all, or have you found some problems as a result of these inspections?
No, and that's actually a really good question, because no, actually we are doing phenomenally well with our bridge safety. We did go out and inspect the remaining bridge inventory, and what I think a lot of people don't understand is that bridges aren't just what you see as overpasses and things like 495. They can be anything that is over a pipe, and we actually went out and we inspected all of those. The only thing that we do have a problem with in the state right now is the corrugated metal pipes that are actually considered bridges. And those were put in place in the 80s, and they were in the metal that was used in those pipes is deteriorating, and they're actually coming to the end of life. So replacing those is going to be a big effort. Sometimes people don't understand that those are actually considered bridges, but we are focusing a lot of energy and time on that.
And are there resources to make those replacements?
There are limited resources, so we actually have to prioritize the ones that need the attention sooner rather than later. But it has to be a priority, because once these pipes fail, they can actually create a serious, it could be a road collapse, it could be anything like that.
Rail safety, obviously a part of the infrastructure system in our state. What's the relationship between Amtrak, those freight trains, and DelDOT?
I know there's a little bit of public concern about the amount of freight that's coming in via rail, but we are working closely with Amtrak and even SEPTA. I know, the recent tragedy with the Amtrak train. We're also working with the Northeast Corridor, which is focusing on trying to get additional resources to make sure that we have adequate, non-congested rail travel.
With all the freight traffic, a lot of times I'll be driving on the road and I'll just look to the side and I feel like I'm constantly seeing freight cars, and they're not moving, but they're always there and they're always different. I mean, is there any schedule that DelDOT is aware of that they are traveling through the state?
Well, and that's another kind of thing that the general public doesn't necessarily always understand, is that stuff is coordinated to, I always say the gnat's eyelash. So absolutely, and unless there's an issue, that all of those time frames and deliveries are all programmed out.
There are some concerns about those cars, and if something should happen, if they tip over, or maybe they're not suited to carry whatever fuel or liquid they're carrying. Is there an emergency plan in place that DelDOT has and rehearses in the event of an emergency?
Absolutely. Our Transportation Management Center, or TMC, located in Smyrna, we have that and the interesting part about that, if you recall last year, we had a bee scenario where the freight train was transporting bees. Right. And we actually even had that emergency plan.
The 301 bypass, where's that stand?
We're still working with the federal government. We have been asked to apply for the TIFIA loan, which is, again, that's a $400 million project. And if we don't get the TIFIA grant from the federal government, that project will not go. We should have a go, no-go by the end of the summer on that project.
Okay.
But things are moving forward.
And public input for that?
Oh, absolutely. When we come back around and we're ready to go, we will go out with some additional public outreach. So it's kind of just the way our process works out.
Okay, Jennifer Cohan, Secretary of Delaware's Department of Transportation, thank you so much for being our first person this week. And you can watch this interview online at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Rob Torno is a bridge and roads kind of guy. He also has the state of our infrastructure in his mind. Hi, Rob. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
A big construction guy, I know. So take us through your cartoon this week. I think Governor Markell's got his hands in the cookie jar a little bit.
Yeah, so infrastructure obviously is important. I've drawn many cartoons about it, and I support a lot of what he wants to do, whether it's raising the gas tax to drive revenue or to raise fees at the DMV. But I kind of find him sort of a hypocrite on this issue, because it seems like now we're trying to take advantage of maybe the tragedy with Amtrak and make a focus on infrastructure. But he's raided the funds of the Transportation Trust Fund last year. He wants to do it again this year. And he systematically cut their budget the last 2 or 3 years because of revenue problems. So while I support his policies, I feel like it needs to be called out that he's sort of, a hypocrite a bit on this issue.
You think this is the year that finally gets settled, whether it's raising the V fees or something else, so we get this solved?
I don't know. It's tough. The Republicans say they agree with it in principle, but then they don't want to raise fees. They don't want to raise taxes. It's like they want some road fairy to come down and magically fix it. I hope so. I mean, we need the infrastructure. It helps business. It helps communities. We'll see. I mean, I hope so.
All right. Still some time to go, more than a month before the end. And then this next image isn't something you drew, Rob, right. But introduce us to this little guy.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So this is my son, Luke. My wife gave birth to him a couple weeks ago, and he's our first child. And it's kind of weird talking about him in his perspective, but we're happy, and I hope that he grows up and doesn't become a cartoonist, right. Engineer, plumber, anything else.
Beautiful. Maybe he can work on the road. So.
Yeah, there we go.
Everybody's healthy and happy, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
His new title, Rob Torno, Proud Parent. Congratulations, Rob.
Thanks.
You can read Rob's work on the pages of newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, Sussex County residents share in the building of a new home. And a Newark woman weaves an interesting first experience. State of Play time. Let's introduce Stephanie Hansen, former Newcastle County Council President, now with the law firm of Young, Conaway, Stargett and Taylor, and Michael Stafford, who is also an attorney. He is a syndicated columnist as well, who's contributed to MSNBC. Thank you both for being here again.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
We're going to start with DFAC numbers, and they're Not as bad as they were, but they still don't, the projection still doesn't get us out of the woods budget-wise. What do you think that says about our budget and what we can anticipate come end of the fiscal year?
Well, I mean, to me, I think there's a broad recognition that many of our funding, our revenue sources are sort of inherently unstable. You can't fund a state government year to year based on gaming revenues or property escheat. And I think there's a broad recognition of that. What it's going to mean long term, you have to pay for the government you want.
Right.
So once we identify the size of government that we want and the services we want it to provide, we have to identify stable revenue streams that are going to fund that. And the most stable revenue streams are income taxes, gross receipt taxes, property taxes. I mean, things that aren't going to be subject to significant variance over time. That's where this is going to have to move. I don't think you can do this with a lotto or by pumping more money into supporting casinos or things of that nature.
Stephanie?
Well, that's true. I mean, the big thing that the DFAC report did is it showed us where we're most vulnerable. And we're most vulnerable because we do plan our budgets, which are really based on unstable revenue sources, on unclaimed property taxes, and on unclaimed property and on gambling revenue, which are inherently unstable. So now we have DFAC telling us that we need to do something. Here's our alarm. But we have I believe the governor put together a committee that then looked at where we're going to raise revenue from, and they have a couple of suggestions. One suggestion is to lower the income tax, I guess, bar for the wealthiest Americans. So the wealthiest Americans wealthiest Delawareans would pay more. Also, the wealthiest seniors may be paying more. Reducing the corporate income tax, but then increasing the gross receipts tax. Now, which of those things or something different will actually see passed at this time next month? Or it's a wild card right now. What I think is probably a good idea, and it came from the other side of the aisle, it came from the Republican side of the aisle, was to look at.
She sounded surprised.
She did.
I know.
She did.
Sometimes good things happen on the other side. But they have come up with the idea. Well, let's take a look at how we're spending money, because then maybe we can get ahead of this issue. So we have DFAC that says, here's our problems. We have the governor's report saying, here's how we're going to raise money. But then we have this other idea that says, let's look at how we're spending money.
It's very easy to talk about, look at how we spend money, look for efficiencies in a general way. But when you get down into the weeds of particular programs and services, I mean, the devil's always in the details with these kind of proposals.
And that's why it would be good to take a look at a snapshot right now. Where are we spending money right now?
Secretary Mark Murphy, under this bill, would not qualify for the position based on classroom experience and things like that. Michael, do you think this bill was a personal attack?
Whether it was a personal attack or not, I think he'd have to answer that question. But it certainly does appear to be to address a deficiency that many people in the community feel is present with the current Secretary of Education, that he doesn't have the qualifications. And if you think about it, I mean, there is an argument to be made that the Secretary of Education in the state of Delaware should have the credentials to be, say, a superintendent. But it's setting aside the credentialing issues. I think one of the things that's been exposed over the past year and a half is that when you're picking department heads in DOE or the Secretary of Education, having local ties, deep local ties, matters. Because when the hard discussions come up, you've got to have somebody who has credibility with people in the school community, whether it's DSEA, superintendents, parent groups. They've got a track record, and there's trust, there's social capital that they can sort of trade on. And I think maybe in the past year and a half we've seen a Department of Education that just doesn't have that bank that it can spend down when the hard questions come up.
From what I've heard, the biggest beef that a lot of educators might have against Secretary Murphy is he just lacks that classroom experience. This would set a bar for how many years of classroom experience a Secretary of Education would be required to have. Stephanie, are you surprised that the state didn't have these sorts of requirements in place already?
Well, it's not that they didn't have any requirements. They had some, but they didn't have this stringent of requirements. This is really, I think, more a vote of no confidence. sort of in Secretary Murphy at this point, and to a degree, sort of a vote of no confidence in Governor Markell for choosing him, because it's anytime you add on more requirements for the person that the governor can choose to fill his cabinet, you're kind of saying, we don't trust you to fill it with someone that gives us confidence that they're going to do a good job.
Okay, we're going to leave things right there. Stephanie Hansen, Michael Stafford, thank you so much for being here on State of Play. And you can check out this segment on our website, newsworks.org/Delaware.
For low-income residents, the struggle to find affordable housing can be daunting. In Sussex County, the median home price is around $240,000, which can make buying a home unattainable for many. That's why a group of Sussex County residents are taking matters and tools into their own hands to build each other's homes themselves. Amanda West swings a hammer like a pro, but she's not.
No, I'm not an outside girl. I like to stay inside, away from the bugs and everything else.
Over the past year, this inside girl has turned into a construction worker. She's working with Milford Housing Development Corporation to build her own home, along with the homes of 4 others.
It's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
West and the others have all signed on to the Shared Build program. With the help of a construction manager, the group has pledged to build 5 homes, one for each member, over little more than a year, in addition to holding full-time jobs.
They are putting 65% of the labor into their homes, and they're working nights and weekends because they have their normal, 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, they have to afford a mortgage. And now they're putting in work on Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays, and they don't have a day off.
They've framed walls, installed shingles, and invested lots of sweat into their new homes.
The average sweat equity that our families are seeing is close to $35,000. It's a full-time wage for a year. Most of our families are making less than $35,000, and that's what they're doing by building their home part-time. The program is for families making 80% and below median income, and there's an emphasis on those making less than 50% of median income. Our program served about 55% of the clients that have been under 50% of median income.
The program is funded through a rural development grant from the Department of Agriculture. Over the past 50 years, 50,000 homes have been built this way nationwide. Since 1996, Milford Housing Development Corporation has helped neighbors build nearly 200 homes. For West and her 3 children, the 2-bedroom apartment they're currently living in will soon be replaced
My room's already over here.
by this home near Georgetown, built by Mom.
I'm hoping that 30, 40 years from now, my kids, they'll be happy with the work that I've done, and they want to go out and help other people do the same thing. They're my drive. So anything that you want to do, I'm proof that you can do. You can do anything that you want to do. And this right here is what I want to do.
This shared home building program is only available in rural areas, which in Delaware includes Sussex and most of Kent County except for Dover. And while anyone who meets income requirements can apply, it's not for the faint of heart. Future homeowners put in at least 30 hours a week performing some serious construction work. But the payoff of a new home is definitely worth it.
First is online at WHYY.org/first. Past shows are there whenever you want to watch. Our specials 100 Mile Monument and Delaware are also online. Check them out. More of First right after this.
Join WHYY and Daniel Tiger for terrific Be My Neighbor Day events this June, July, and August. Postcards, planting flowers, beautiful community art, free for everyone. Learn more at WHYY.org/events.
For First Experience this week, we head to Newark to meet an artist who has used her art training to inform her textile work. Maureen Kamerick is a weaver. She weaves together silk, colors, and texture, and the results are beautiful.
My name is Maureen Kamerick. I'm a weaver, a textile designer. It's something I've been doing for 30 years or so, and for the last maybe 20 years I've concentrated just on working with silk. I was an arts major in college. I had never even seen a loom, really, so I was just painting and drawing. For my husband's work, we moved to Tennessee, to Nashville. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do here, you know? So finally I had a chance to learn how to actually make the textile. So I apprenticed to a weaver down there. I started out doing those old-style American coverlets and fabrics and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of evolved from there. I have had to learn to almost like appreciate the machine and work with it and fix it when it breaks. It wasn't the machines that drew me to it. It's kind of cool when you see it. It's still very, very interesting how these machines can take these little strands of things and then come up with cloth. People are sometimes very surprised that it's still done. In general, people are appreciative even if they don't really understand it. What attracts you to the work is not me telling you it took 1,000,000 hours to do it. It's you saying, wow, look how beautiful that is. Look at how that color is used. Look how that feels. My favorite part, I like a lot of parts, but the most like artistically satisfying part is I guess what you would call the designing part, and particularly the color part. It's taking the white silk, it's coming up with all these colors, and then putting them together, and then the kind of pattern that you use, different patterns like show off the color differently. I think to me, that's the coolest part. I find that people that really appreciate it the most are not necessarily people who know exactly what it is or people with a lot of money, but they're people who like the idea of the individual hand-done thing. When someone can walk away with a beautiful object that is functional, that will last for like years and years and years, and that's what I guess they take away with it, that how a handmade thing is different from what you might buy at a store. 100 years ago, everybody's grandmother had a spinning wheel in the living room, and now, I mean, well, to say the least, it's a different world, you know. The final beauty of a piece of cloth, I guess really, I still really like that, and that's what kept me doing it.
You can find Maureen at craft shows all over the East Coast, including here in Delaware. For more information, visit her on the web at mksilks.com.
Next week on First, we report on Wilmington's violence issues through the eyes of the makeout mob. And The Daily Show's made a living on the humor in politics. We'll talk to a UD professor on its impact.
Also next week on First, no Shirley. This is Shirley Minn's last show with us for a few months as she's getting ready to welcome baby number 2. Of course, we wish you and the baby and the family all the best.
Thank you.
And we're going to need some pictures.
No problem.
So get those over as soon as you can.
You're going to tell me to stop sending pictures.
Right, yes. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Nichelle Polston, Avi Wolfman-Arent, and proud mama Shirley Minn, I'm Mark Eichman. Have a great holiday weekend.